From my collection, What Is Left Behind, Garden Elegies, and I'm going to read just a handful of poems out of that, and then read some of my newer stuff, and also a couple flash fiction pieces here along the way too. This book, just a couple things to kind of, I guess, know about it before I get started. I wrote it for the women in my family, so all the women who came before me, and they were very good gardeners, and I'm still working on the green thumb part, but they had it down. And how I got to know some of my grandmothers was through the flowers they left behind, which is where the title comes from. And my grandmothers, I was born kind of late in the family, so one of my grandmothers was born in 1890 and the other in 1905, so I don't really have much recollection of them. So what this book does is it tries to kind of discover them through these flowers they left behind. The other thing to know, I guess, is a lot of these poems deal with the language of flowers, the legends of flowers, and they have their own history and their own myth. And so a lot of these poems start off with maybe an epigraph that has a literary allusion or some verse about the history of that particular plant. So I'll read the title poem, which is in 5 short parts here, and it's called What Is Left Behind. 1. Your gardens to walk through, years after I sang Holy, Holy, loyal as a sword of iris, heavy with the scent of vesper flowers still thick in my hair. 2. The hope that you might return, vulnerable again in the skin, with your eyes blue, with your eyes brown, your hands, as I remember, adorned with silver bands, and your hands unadorned but filled with violet petals. 3. Signs that you cannot be silenced, the fires in your roots still burning in my veins, and the dreams of your crooked, thin-lipped smile, opening like a rosebud to confess, and your full lips pressed against my ear, soft as a daylily. 4. My endeavor to unravel the delicate stitching of your sweet violets, pansies, ferns sewn along the trellis, so I can find my way to you with feverfew bound tightly to my wrist. 5. Your marigolds, heliotropes, gathering in the garden, thick with the scents of crab apple, sweet rocket, all these things left behind, yet still breathing you. Thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is called Marigolds, and the little epigraph that comes before that is taken from The Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. And it says, the marigold that goes to bed with the sun, and with him rises weeping. Familiar to me, I tend your marigolds, hardy stems, thick with pungent odor, as September's rich decay bruises under my thumb. I think of you, tending the marigolds, their golden and darkening heads crimson against the white stucco of the house. I tend what is left, careful to avoid the fragile roots. I tend knowing you would prefer the crimson over the gold, yet knowing nothing more, as my hands catch on the stems thick with trickery, against frost, drought, against my knowing you through the marigolds you left stationed around the house, fragile soldiers left to protect what is within. Thank you. I'm going to read the next poem called Daffodils, because they should be out there and they're not yet, at least at my house. So one of my favorites in the spring. And the epigraph from that reads that the name Narcissus comes from a Greek word meaning to numb. Out the window, the daffodil bulbs you planted in the fall have forced their green stems through the thawing soil. I write. Can almost feel the petals fall across my face. Last fall I felt so optimistic. The daffodils are bending to catch their reflections in the leftover snow. They are caught somewhere between spring and winter. I write. This morning I wanted to walk in the garden and be numbed by the fragrance. Now the dawn edges its gray light onto the 2 smooth sheets of the bed. Your stationery feels starchy beneath my hands. I write. I must be caught somewhere between. The raw edges of spring are pushing up against my soil. The ink in my pen is difficult, a scratchy voice from my tight throat. I'm going to read just one more from this collection, and it's called Ferns, and it was actually the first piece I ever wrote for this, and it turned into a whole collection based on that. But this is for those ferns that grow where I grew up, and they're these ferns that start out really small, but then by the time they're done, like in midsummer, they're taller than I am, and they're kind of actually a garden escapee and kind of a nuisance, but they're beautiful too, and they're always green. You know, even in the winter you see little bits of greenery. The little epigraph about that is it's believed that treading on fern will cause the poor unfortunate traveler to become confused and lose his way. And if I should lose myself among the fern, what I mean to say is that I am canopied by blue sky, or that I am captured between the roots of the elm, or maybe I mean encircled with fronds, or is it ensnared in their lacework, or perhaps I mean that I will find myself such a strange relief to be invisible, or maybe just unseen in this forest, a green tendril, an edge of bracken, a leaf that cannot hear its name called from afar. Thank you. I'm going to transition into some other work here and kind of shift gears a little bit. And, well, actually, I guess before I shift gears, I'm going to read one more poem I wish would have been in the chapbook, but it just didn't, make it in time, but I think it kind of fits with it. And it's called Miracles. And this poem came to me after a nice spring day of driving around and looking around Wayne at all the old places in the country and all the old farmhouses and everything's still there. So, Miracles. Whenever I drive by that old abandoned farmhouse with the orange daylilies blooming against the white chip siding, I always wish for planters' hands, for a green thumb that could summon life from the ground, that could revive the apparently dead with its electrifying touch. Whatever I plant dies, not immediately, but in time. I will forget to water the geranium, its red petals will scatter like SOS signals across the table, its leaves will shrivel, and all systems will go on high alert, doomed to a purgatory of half-life, until I remember the necessity of water. By then, it's often too late. You, on the other hand, must have never forgotten. Your internal clock must have been set on a schedule to protect what you cared about. Your family, your house, your gardens must have always burst out in bloom. Sometimes I can correct the damage of my neglect. Sometimes the smallest drink of water can miraculously revive a drooping leaf. Sometimes in minutes, it's possible to see the leaf regain its posture as it pulls itself up from the soil like a ballet dancer finding her feet. But I imagine you never let things get to that state of desperation. I still drive by your old farmhouse and see your orange daylilies bright against the chipped white siding, the hardy blooms, the lush leaves, your legacy written in petals, your garden remaining behind you. Sometimes I stop to clear some of the weeds, or sometimes trim back an overhanging branch. Then I feel how much I miss you, even though we never met. Thank you. I'm going to read just a couple more poems before I read some couple of flash fiction stories. And the next two are from a collection I've kind of been working with and thinking about doing some love poems to kind of something different from elegies anyway. But I wanted to write them about sort of unusual things. So this one's about a cottonwood tree, and then the second one I'm going to read is about an avocado. So we'll start with the tree first. Preservation, a love poem. That tree is more mine than yours through the very laws of love and adoration. Its boughs, roots, and branches reaching beyond property lines, beyond laws of ownership. Its value more than an extra half acre of corn, or 20 bushels of soybeans, or convenient driveway into your field. Because that cottonwood tree is more its own than anyone else's. It's a cosmic placeholder. Its boughs keep the immense prairie sky from falling, preventing a catastrophe of jumbled clouds and disoriented stars. Its roots anchor down the plains so we're not set adrift, by the undulating rhythm of a sea of grass. Its branches harvest the wind, catch the melodies of cheerful meadowlarks and raspy katydids. Its twigs mingle the cadence of rain with the soft percussion of snow to compose the song of our collective history, to reassure us of our continued survival. The song gathers in the leaves, pulses in the trunk, reverberates to the roots, creates a tempo meant to awaken the wilderness still left beating in our own untamed hearts. Thank you. This is the poem that's a love poem for the avocado, so I'll just get started with that. It's called Reflections on an Alligator Pear, which I did a little research, and that's another name for an avocado, is alligator pear. So if you want another word for it, that's what it is. Resting in the palm of my hand, the avocado sits like a small olive green boulder, its rough surface dimpled, appearing hardly edible, despite sticker number 4046's insistence that it will be ripe when soft. There is nothing quite like unhusking a perfect fruit, cutting through the skin firm like pleather, slipping the skin from the cool, damp fruit, mining out the perfectly round seed. It must be something like discovering a secret tropical island, taking its sand between your fingers, letting the wind catch the grains, and whispering that the world is yours. Cutting into an avocado, though, is an act of faith. You never know what inhabits its innermost regions. You hope for a lime green heart, creamy and rich in flavor, but my gingerly squeeze is not always an effective test. Perhaps because I'm a no-coaster, unfamiliar with sun-ripened leaves and blue trace beaches. I can't tell the difference between soft and too soft, between just right and too ripe. I have perhaps coasted along too long in high, windy seas of corn and highways of wide-open skies. One time in college, I meant to impress my parents with my sophisticated palate, so I brought an avocado home. I thought it was ripe. I had waited, stayed the course, advised by the label ripe when soft. When the time came, I knifed into the fruit, myself ripe with expectations, only to find the center hard, unmashable, unsuitable for guacamole or human consumption. We tried to eat it anyway. But my parents never tried another avocado and still remain suspicious of my taste. I used to mash an avocado and mix it with guacamole seasoning or sour cream, but not now. I prefer to simply slice the fruit, place it directly on my tortilla, my turkey sandwich, my scrambled eggs. I like to taste it for what it is. Thank you. I'm going to move from poetry and finish up my time here by sharing two stories. And the first one, before I read much from it, I wanted to mention that the speaker, the narrator for this, is a farmer who is coming home from a long day in the hayfield, and it's a really hot day. And so that's kind of the attitude of the speaker of the piece. And it's called Bats. It was the kind of July day that cures the freshly mown prairie grass and makes a man long for a cool drink. And here I was driving home from the hayfield with the wind streaming through the windows of my old Ford and looking forward to setting down for a few minutes in the air conditioning while my wife fixed me a tall glass of that cool water. When I turned the corner and pulled into the yard, I saw a new pickup I didn't recognize, and a short woman with big sunglasses that covered most of her face, standing just outside the driver's side door. I pulled up alongside her, hit the brakes that let out an ungodly grinding sound, and said, "You better get back in your truck. We've got a dog around here that doesn't like some people." She brushed her hair back from her face and said, "I like dogs. Never had any trouble with them." I'd heard this reply before. Last time was when this group of female Jehovah's Witnesses stopped by our farm, and this nicely dressed young woman got out of her car in hopes of converting me, leaving her door open behind her. I told her to watch out for the dog, but she didn't believe me. Next thing I knew, old King had jumped in the car, made a loop through the back seat, putting his muddy paw prints all over the women in the back. All I could hear was a chorus of giggling and screaming from these Jehovah's Witness women. They left not too long afterward, and needless to say, I'm still not converted. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but King has been known to nibble on a few unsuspecting visitors. I hoped that today wouldn't be the case, but I'd done my best to warn her. She didn't seem like the type that was used to listening to other people's advice. She continued leaning on her truck and went on to ask me if I had any bats. Bats, I said, puzzled, and still longing for that cool drink. Yes, bats, you know, she said condescendingly, making a flapping motion with her arms. You want to look out in the barn? I asked, thinking this was the strangest thing that happened around here for a while. No, I'm doing a study on tree bats. I have an antenna. I want to place it out in the trees and monitor their coming and going. Really? I didn't even know we had tree bats. Really, she replied, looking unsurprised at my lack of awareness about the various species of bats, or really about anything, for that matter. Well, go right ahead. I don't care. You can pull out back in the mulberries and look to see if there's anywhere you think you might find them. Will do, thanks, she said, getting back into her pickup. I started walking to the house in the direction of the cool water when I saw King barreling into the yard. He must have been following me all the way from the field. His tongue was lolling out of his mouth, hanging sideways, and he was puffing like a freight train's engine. Come on, King, I said. Let's go get us a drink. I reached down and patted the top of his warm black head. King was one of those dogs of an indeterminate type. Looked something like a black lab, but probably composed of many different breeds and forming a hybrid strain of dog. Two things were certain, though. One, he was a runner, could keep pace with the pickup at 40 miles per hour. On my old truck, you really had to put the pedal down good to get around him as he kicked up gravel against the truck's side, stretching out his racehorse legs. Two, he was loyal. That dog would have went most anywhere in any distance for me. I imagine this was part of the reason he was so hard to outrun. I just got into the porch good and started to feel the cool air. Then my wife screeches out that the house doesn't seem to have any water again. Jesus Christ, I mutter, reaching down to relace my shoes. Heading to the screen door with King at my heels, I say, Geronimo, and King lets out his customary growl, stands up on his two hind legs, and uses his front paws to push the door open. I follow him out into the July furnace, and we head towards the cellar. I swing the heavy door open, and King sets his black haunches down next to it. King has never mastered his fear of stairs, so I descend alone into the cool and musty depths. Switching on the light, I immediately see the problem. The fuse that controls the pump is out again. I quickly fix it for about the fourth time this summer. All the way back to the house, I anticipate that cool glass of water. It's a short walk, and I didn't think that anything could happen to interrupt my quest this time. But as I reached for the porch door, I heard the sound of a fast-running motor coming from out back, and I see the Bat Lady's truck flash through and out the drive. She only slows down long enough to give me a glare, which acknowledges that I was right about something, the nature of King Dog. Because there he is, hot on her tracks, sufficiently recovered enough from his run home to be keeping an easy 25-mile-per-hour pace. He's looking up at her through the truck's window with a menacing gaze, and she releases me from her glare just in time to hit the gravel road to town with some degree of accuracy. She revs up the engine and King kicks it into high gear. Last I see of them, they've both crested the hill, but I don't worry. King's been to town before, so he knows how to get back. He always does. I continue my mission to the house. My wife opens the door and sweetly hands me that long-awaited glass of cool ice water. I sit down, unlace my shoes, and drink every last drop. Thank you. And if you're curious, King is a real character. He's a real live dog, and has actually participated in a number of these activities. So the last piece I'll read is a short story called Heartland. And it's given from the perspective of someone who's kind of a transplant to small town living. When we pulled into our drive, Our next-door neighbors were sitting in the front yard and smoking their cigarettes in the darkening twilight. At least that's where they were until we parked the car and got out. Then the man and wife promptly, as was their habit, rose up from their crouched poses on the front steps and dragged their children, even the one who was attempting to wave, into their rickety house across from ours on Elm Street. It wasn't as if this was the first time that this had happened. Rather, over the last 6 weeks in which we had lived in the Crackerjack house in the middle of nowhere, in the heart of the heartland, in the smallest of small-town America, this behavior had become a ritual as predictable as the evening sun filling the empty western sky each night. We would simply pull in the drive, and they would simply open their door and get in. "There's our dear neighbors. Maybe I should go ask for a cup of sugar," I commented to my husband, who was tired and not amused by my snide remarks at the end of a long day. Since we'd moved here, Ken had been working nights as a janitor at a local high school while he was commuting to a nearby university finishing his degree. The janitorial work definitely wasn't his dream job, and who could blame him, going to work just as everyone else was coming home. There was few things that people would relish about this, but in a small town cradled on the map by nothing in particular, neither one of us could be too picky about how we paid our bills. That's why I'd been working for the last few days at the local food town, stocking shelves and throwing away the overripe fruit. These jobs we'd have to do until we could find better, once Ken finished his teaching degree. "What do you think they do over there in the dark?" I asked Ken, once we got in the house. I was not so subtly pulling apart the Venetian blinds and peeking across the street, trying to make sense of the shadowed windows of the neighbor's house. "They never turn on any lights but that one in the basement," I continued. "Maybe they're cooking up some meth," he said, and by his tone I could tell he didn't want to play any guessing games. He was too tired. He had an early morning the next day. "Now, you wouldn't think that they'd be doing that, having 2 small kids and all, and living right here 2 blocks from Main Street," I said as I thought of a blonde girl with her braids and sundress and with her hand posed to wave. That wave had been to me the one sign of heart in the heartland, an oncoming boat for a drowning man, even though it was cut short by her sour-looking mother dragging her into the house. So much for a welcoming committee, I thought. "You know, the other day, when I was out getting the mail, the guy next door told me that one of the other neighbors said that one of us was dead," Ken said. "Really?" I remarked, feeling surprised despite the last few weeks of getting used to the politics of small-town gossip. So far we'd been drug dealers and other sorts of various criminals, but being reported dead was new. "Really?" Ken replied. "Well, they could have at least sent over a casserole or stopped to see if the not dead one of us needed anything. What do you think they do over there?" I continued. "Just forget about it," Ken said, as he started getting ready for bed. I got ready for bed too, but then decided that I'd stay up a while and read. I had too much on my mind and there wasn't any use of keeping Ken up with my insomniac tossing and turning. I went out into the living room, turned on the table lamp, and checked to see if the front door was locked. What I could possibly be locking out was an unsolvable mystery, but old habits die hard. As I glanced across the street one final time, I saw the light from our neighbor's basement eerily and dimly glowing in the night like a vigil candle. Then suddenly the light went out, and I stood there alone, peering out into the loneliness of the night. From across the house, I could hear Ken's shallow breathing as he slipped into the rhythms of his evening slumber. The near silence was deafening, and here I was wide awake, accoutered in nothing but a ratty terry cloth robe and pink slippers. As though propelled by forces outside of myself, I found myself unlocking the door and stepping out into the darkness of the night. My movements were slow and surreptitious as I crossed Elm Street, banking on the hazy moon and the cloudy night to keep my presence a secret. I thought about the girl's half-wave, but her wave became inverted, transformed into a beckoning motion, drawing me across the street. Before I knew it, I was face to face with the neighbor's mysterious window, and there was no going back. I leaned down and felt the coolness of the window pane as I cupped my hands against the glass and peered into the forbidden and secret recesses of our neighbor's house. As I thrillingly gazed into their basement, I wondered about what I would see. Would I see shelves stocked with meth lab chemicals? Would I see bodies of grinning dead men strung across the room? Would I see whatever it was that they kept hidden and protected? Whatever it was that accounted for their terrible and unexplained hostility? But what I see is a drawn shade. What I see is absolutely nothing. Yet the longer I peer into the window, the more I can see of myself. I see a mirror image of my lone figure, my dark eyes, my uncombed hair, even my pink bedroom slippers in the foreground. The massive open spaces of the heartland fill in the backdrop behind me, threatening and promising to envelop my small, stark figure. I feel the midnight breeze unfold against me like the pages of a vast map filled with nothing besides my red, palpitating heart, and seas of rolling hills and tall grass. This is the heartland. I raise my hand in a half wave and see my reflection wave back. Thank you. It's been a great audience.
Thank you, Stephanie. The next reader, Lin Brummels, is a licensed Nebraska mental health practitioner and certified professional counselor, and she has worked at Wayne State College's Counseling Center for many years. Lin has published poetry in journals, anthologies, a collaborative poetry project, and online. Her essay, Civilization, was published in Ankle Deep and Knee Deep. Her poetry chapbook, Hard Times, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2015, and it won the 2016 Nebraska Book Award for chapbooks. Brummels' second chapbook, Cottonwood Strong, will be published by Finishing Line Press in 2018. When is that?
Don't have a definite date yet.
Just right there, so close. Lin is the mother of 2 grown children, Zeke and Liz, and the caregiver of Pickles. Help me welcome Lin Brummels.
Thank you very much. I'm always just a little bit shorter than everybody else. In keeping with the garden theme, I'm going to read a poem that I've just been working on to start out, and then we'll go to Hard Times and work on some of those. This is called Garden Therapy. A recent study proved what I've known for years. Digging in the dirt treats depression as well as, or better than, antidepressants. There's something magic about bending, reaching, kneeling directly on soil that stretches us out of our bad backs, cures headaches, lets us forget troubles for a while. Gardening helps me take a vacation from electronics and is a fine way to chase away a day of frustration with government bureaucracy, paperwork, and websites. When my sheepdog Pickles drops a frisbee over a stubborn weed in front of me, it's time to let it go, play for a while. Another therapeutic intervention that improves mental health. The first poem I'm going to read from the book is called Big Men's Knees. I've known a lot of sort of oversized guys in my life, and they all sort of have some common elements, if you will. Okay, big men's knees. Big guys relish how much they can eat, how many beers they can drink, brag about amounts they can lift, carry, move when they are young. Believe they are invincible. Some were given nicknames like Tank and Moose. Do their best to live up to those monikers. They recognize value in exercise, even encourage others, but never engage in that vile practice. They buy big men's clothes, first-class plain seats, recliners dwarfing other furniture, old Cadillacs, or oversized pickups to accommodate their bulk. They avoid fragile-looking chairs in other people's houses. Growing ever bigger, they limp or hobble a bit in their 40s, limit walking, and attend only events that accommodate pickup traffic door to door. Each stone of weight gained pressures heart and frame. Doctors recommend new knees by 55. Only then these guys begin to consider losing weight, but they can't exercise, too much pressure on the knees. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the sculptor Herb Menery. He's a Nebraska sculptor. I think he's currently has a studio in Colorado, but his family has a ranch in the Sandhills. And there's a bench sculpture in front of the library at Wayne State. And I saw one of his smaller sculptures. It was about yay big. I just fell in love with it, but it was outside my price range, shall we say. It was a pioneer woman, and he titled it Reply Requested. And so this is what I imagine this woman would have experienced. So this poem is called Prairie Post, after Reply Requested by Herb Menery. She waited patiently some days. Other times she paced back and forth with a baby in her arms, eyes continually darting to the window, peering out to search the horizon for a possible visitor, a neighbor passing on the trip to town, or better, on the way home, as there may have been a package or letter sent her way. She wrote to several relatives in Philadelphia last month, to her mother in Syracuse, and a week after that to an old friend recently moved to Chicago with her new husband, closing each missive with Reply Requested. She wrote a letter to the editor of the Denver Post about the shocking cost of sugar and flour. She inwardly fumed that her correspondents didn't appreciate how anxiously she awaited each response, perhaps not realizing how far she lived from any town, how seldom she was able to leave home, 3 children under 5 requiring all her time, husband gone days and many nights, cowboying for the big ranch down the road. She reached out to absently pet the dog, thought about the last time she read a newspaper, tried to recall the last time all 3 children were asleep, chores done, and it was light enough to read the Bible or one of the books that she kept hidden from little boy's boisterous play, her daughter's tiny fingers. She found time to write a quick note to her sister in Omaha about the tiny red flowers just now blooming near the barn. She wrote about the baby's first step, her oldest son's attempt to climb the hayloft ladder, his fall, how thankful she was he did not break any bones, ended the missive. Reply Requested. Sent the message with her neighbor, kind enough to stop for mail on his trip to town. And sort of in the notion of pioneer days, the Omaha paper once in a while, the World Herald runs a little, 100 years ago this kind of thing happened, and it'll be like a little paragraph. And so I saw this one paragraph about a horse thief, and I thought, oh, that's a really interesting idea. So this is titled Horse Thief. And this is about how this person became to be a thief. They moved to a hard-scrappled Kepahaw County ranch with 5 kids. She raised them alone in a 2-room tar paper tenant shack, prairie wind howling through the walls after he froze to death cowboying in the blizzard of '88. Kids left Sand Hill country at an early age, made their way in life. Oldest daughter married young, moved away. 2 sons next in line hired out to wrangle cows. A 4th died of a fever, and the last, named Bert, saw the lay of the land, headed out to find another way to get by. Bert was a natural-born writer, a wonderkin who tamed any mount for pay, but quit working, took up horse thieving as more profitable and fun, courted a reputation thereabouts for borrowing animals. Caught and convicted as a horse thief by age 19, served time in the Nebraska State Pen beginning in '01. Checked in to serve the sentence at 5 foot 8 inches tall, 140 pounds. Burt claimed to be a married man, worked in the prison broom factory, performed duties well according to prison records. It's uncertain how Burt's condition was hidden. Unclear how the guards failed to notice through admittance bath, physical exam, living with hardened men for 11 long months, that Burt was really a young lady named Lena. The prison doctor confirmed the story that Burt, née Lena, was a she, her gender revealed after she spurned her cellmate's advances. Amused at the fuss, Lena requested a dress to replace her suit of stripes for the move to the women's reformatory. Governor Savage heard the story, pardoned Lena on condition she reform her ways, returned to Springview, to live with her mother the rest of her days. My son went to college in Kearney at UNK, and during one spring break, I went down to visit him during the season when all of the birds are going. So this is called geese. My son and I search the sky for the fowl we hear honking around us. Heavens filled with birds wheeling, careening, V-forming, reforming, sighting this fertile ground. Cornfields draw, seduce, pulling great shapes closer. Visible at twilight, the birds take form. The flock guiding, cajoling, singing, bringing the crew in for a night landing. Protected on the edge of the River Platte, the fields are a refuge, fueling station before the long trip north. This visit to my grown son concludes a respite from my solo journey. Now I must turn my face like the geese to a new horizon. Sometimes I kind of get lost in my own head and think only about my stuff and not what's going on in the world around me. And this next poem takes place when my kids were young. It's called Tire Swing. Long after the house vanished, the tire swing hangs alone, sentinel on a now abandoned homestead. The late afternoon winter light reflects the bald tire, weathered to gray after years of hanging from the old cottonwood. The wind through the trees sounds like children calling, their voices reaching back to a summer afternoon I stopped for eggs. I knocked repeatedly. Kids said, "Mom and Dad are inside." I was naively insistent, thinking of supper waiting my attention down the hill. My neighbor answered the door, buttoning his shirt, unlocked the screen door. I suddenly understood, felt ashamed for the intrusion. The children, unconcerned on the tire swing, pushed each other to and fro, echoing the rhythms of life. My neighborhood, like I imagine many neighborhoods, are full of stories. People over coffee or over a beer will tell a story. And sometimes really I go, oh, that's an interesting story. So this one is one of those situations. It's called Unmarked. After Danish immigrant parents died, she lived her entire unmarried life on the family farm, caring for her single brother. Brother tilled the family land until called to heavenly account. Sister stayed alone minding the homestead till she passed. Their sisters married local boys, raised families nearby. Nieces and nephews inherited the family farm. None of them wanted to live in the charming old house without plumbing and electricity. Kept the place intact to protect the family secret. The old maid and bachelor brother made a baby, stillborn, buried her by the old house in an unmarked grave. Buildings donated to museums on condition nothing disturbed the little grave site. House, machine shed moved, the rest bulldozed. Trees left as a shrine to this lost soul. And as you might be able to tell by now, I have a real interest in old houses. This one was located a couple miles from where I live, and now is gone and is a cornfield. But at the time, it was, I imagined a great life for it. So this is called Hard Times. Abandoned houses dotted the countryside, marking failed farms, homesteaded 4 or 5 to a section, lost to banks, get big or get out. One of the last bulldozed sat in a wildflower-filled rolling meadow facing the morning sun. A spring-fed stream meandered in the valley between the hills. The old house invited exploration. Doors swollen open from decades of weather, broken baby crib, toy fragments scattered around the abandoned home. Neighborhood lore posited that a family of squatters lived here in the 70s, kept themselves warm in the brick-lined basement, heated by ancient wood range still holding court, rotting cob pile nearby. Afternoon light shone through rafters, showcased good bones of this old structure. She must have been someone's pride and joy. So in sort of in keeping with the winter theme, this is a story about the really heavy snow, if anyone remembers, of the winter of 09-10, of this 2009-10. And this is called The Crossing. The horses huddled south of the barn this late February day during yet another snow, hoping more hay will magically appear. Walking over a drift that covers the fence, they create a crossing into the grove, remembering summer grass. The 7 stroll over this barrier daily or more often in search of food. I watch them cross with trepidation, wondering if one, then another, will be caught in the wires as snow begins to slide away into spring. So this is another new one that is sort of in the livestock arena, so we say, called The Pasture Fence is Bulletproof. Also known as Escape Proof, built with REA pole-sized post and 5 strands of tightly stretched barbed wire. But when I topped the last hill on the road home near dusk on the first raw 35-degree late October day, 40-mile-an-hour wind howling, I see cattle spread across the road like ants pouring from the nest in a quest for food. They are in the neighbor's just harvested bean field, a half-mile away in another neighbor's half-picked corn, and in my mostly empty garden. In the 5 minutes it takes to change into running shoes, warm clothes, and make phone calls for help, the cows split into a group moving further away into the corn, like escapees putting distance between themselves and prison. Another bunch mills around the garden and yard like prison trustees, hoping they won't be blamed for the jailbreak. The sheepdog is no help, only wants to play frisbee. A half dozen thirsty animals willingly enter the corral. Others circle me as I try to wrangle escapees. My son diagnoses the breakout via phone. The fence held, but one of the gates gave way to cows crowding in a corner. Partners arrive just in time to fix the escape hole. Herds follow their pickup home across bean field with typical cow lack of remorse. And then I want to read a couple from Wayne State's new anthology that Stephanie edited, The Flatwater Stirs. We have a number of, like I said, characters in our community. So this is based on one of them. It's called Picker's Decay. Fred's mom filled their home with auction finds until only paths remained through the rooms. 3 older siblings married young and left town. Fred took on the job of saving stuff when his mom died, buying houses and shops to fill with old furniture, books, and bottles found scouring others' trash. He never sold anything, fearful of being cheated. 20-some years later, roofs are collapsing, wildlife has invaded, and places are beyond repair. After years of unheeded warnings to clean up, the village board condemned his buildings, gave Fred a timeline to fix things. The ultimatum hit Fred like a freight train he didn't hear coming. His long-term, long-suffering girlfriend offered Fred's nearly collapsed hotel free to the museum. But it was unclear if she had power to make the offer, and the museum was uncertain if it would take on the obligation. There were bids to buy the old inn 20 years ago, when it could have been easily renovated. Now, demolition costs run in the $1,000s and more to restore. Rather like Fred's mental health, that could have been easily treated then, but will take a long-term effort now. So this might be considered a companion piece called Hotel Breakdown. Museum supporters gather to consider the fate of Fred's deteriorating hotel next door, offered to the group last meeting, and hear the story of Fred's worsening state of mind, village concern for his father's health and move to a nursing home, Fred's suicidal threats, rumors of threats towards others, his mental health swings, county sheriff's arrival at their large, cluttered house where Fred fell apart after the city council condemned all his properties, stuffed full of the town's discarded bits of broken furniture, tin cans, old bottles, rotting newspapers collected before garbage pickup, leftovers from auctions, boxes of plastic bags, and unidentifiable items decaying where he stowed them sometime in the past 20 years because he might need just that item someday. Fred was driven out of town under emergency protective custody in a patrol car. While he's away, his sister and girlfriend with power of attorney have cleaned out and sold buildings. All hope he stays gone long enough for the changes to go through legal stages. And I'll finish with this last one that is set in just down the road from here. Many of you who have lived in the community know that the regional center was once home for people with mental health problems before it got to its current status, and the cemetery was part of that institution, and people who died there were buried there. So this is called Throwaway Lives. 842 souls buried in wooden boxes without ceremony on insane asylum land, sometimes with numbered headstones, others just buried. Tiny markers gradually sank into graves in a graveyard no one tended. New coffins added as more died in that hellhole. Families relieved of the burden of funerals for the wife, daughter, husband, son, grandparent, never mentioned in polite society. A half-dozen markers remain in this tiny graveyard, surviving old days of institutional life when folks could be locked away because they were poor, homeless, disabled, mentally ill, rejected by society. People spent their lives in institutional buildings, subjected to cruelty or kindness of guards, abandoned by family and society. died there in anonymity, unidentified bones, never resting with their ancestors. States sold the sacred land for a song, gentleman's agreement from one institutional leader to another. New owners promised to preserve this historic graveyard, built the ag complex, and a parking lot around old cemetery grounds, now home to tractor shows, plant sales, cattle breeding demonstrations. Odd guardians of old graves. So I guess if you have any questions, you can fire away. Somebody back down? Yep.
For Stephanie, do you prefer to write poetry or flash?
So the question was if I prefer to write poetry or flash fiction, and I like to write creative nonfiction too. I like doing all of them, and so I kind of find myself, jockeying back and forth between the different genres. I would say I probably started out as more of a poet than a fiction writer, but I enjoy experimenting with all the forms, so it's hard for me to make up my mind if I like one better than the other, but I enjoy them all three. Yeah.
Do you find that it's easier to tell a story through a poem or through fiction or nonfiction, I guess? Like, do you think it's easier, because I noticed Lynn told a lot of stories in poems and Stephanie, you did a bit of both. So for both of you, do you have a preference?
I think I prefer to do storytelling through poems, but I'm trying to, work on other things as well.
I think I prefer telling a narrative through prose just because it gives me more room to expand and I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm a little bit more imagistic in poetry, like I really like to get in, and I think I do that in my prose too, but I feel like I definitely have more room for more of the details in those longer prose pieces.
What do you think is the difference between nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and creative, just regular fiction? How do you distinguish the difference in that?
That's a question we have a lot of discussions about in my creative nonfiction class, actually, because I think everybody has to find that for themselves, because both of my stories, there's things in there that are real, like, King is actually a real dog who, has participated in a lot of the activities I described in the story, but I would say, I think for people, the basis for creative nonfiction is that it has to have at least 1 foot, firmly planted in the truth. And so, and I think everybody has to find that line for themselves, like what they're comfortable with. But you definitely want it to be, if you're doing creative nonfiction, you definitely want to be able to say, yeah, this is real, there's some truth behind this story. And maybe what's the creative aspect of it is how you choose to tell the story. That's how I would differentiate.
Thank you.
All right, please make sure to put your phone back on regular ringtone or turn it on. Also, I want to thank everybody for coming. I know the weather wasn't really the best this morning. We were all pretty nervous about it too, but it turned out to be a pretty nice day. And please keep in mind, May 2nd from 6 to 8 in here, we will have Arts Night. And that will be the culmination of the semester for the creative writing students as well. So again, thank you all for coming, and please help me give another round of applause for Stephanie and Lynn. Thank you.
You can have them sign their books. Your books now.
He was asking about the
You're surprised about
How do you
that?
get this far without?
I don't know. I question that.
What?